Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are jumping straight into a totally wild, honestly kind of paradoxical digital phenomenon, the deep dive video essay. Because look, in a world where our media is so fragmented, millions of us are collectively falling down these massive, multi-hour rabbit holes. We're watching everything from the logistics of theme park lines to literature that is so unapologetically dark, like Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian, that Hollywood literally refuses to touch it. So, I want you to be honest with yourself for a second. When was the last time you stayed up until, I don't know, 3 a.m., glued to a documentary about a TV show you've never even seen? Because it's a super common experience right now. We are constantly being told that our attention spans are completely shot, right? That we can only handle bite-sized content. But the actual data tells a completely different story. We actively let the algorithm drag us into these exhaustive analyses of the most niche topics imaginable. So why? What is the psychological hook here? You just have to look at the stark contrast. On one hand, your standard social media feed is just pumping out these 15-second clips meticulously engineered for a quick, fleeting dopamine hit. But then on the other side, you have the deep dive video essay. We're talking multi-hour epics that look and feel like premium feature-length documentaries. It completely shatters this idea that modern consumers won't sit through long-form content. And just to show you exactly how extreme this format actually gets, 5 hours, 34 minutes, and 58 seconds. That is the actual literal runtime of creator Quentin Review's analysis of the Nickelodeon sitcom Victorious. And you want to know the craziest part? That runtime is just for part 1. There's more. And somehow, the sheer absurdity of that dedication is exactly what draws us in. Section 1. Obsessive Pop Culture Autopsies. So there's this massive, weird, and wonderful spectrum of niche obsessions that are capturing millions of views. You've got Defunctland doing this incredible nearly 2-hour deep dive into the history of Disney's FastPass system. You've got Jenny Nicholson spending over 2.5 hours meticulously deconstructing the Vampire Diaries. Then you have deep dives into flat Earth conspiracy theories by Folding Ideas, fascinating explorations of anime and Black culture, and literally multi-hour arguments defending Ratatouille as Pixar's absolute magnum opus. But here's the secret sauce. Here's how they actually keep us watching. They use what we can call the micro to macro pivot. So you click on that 5-hour Victorious review thinking, oh, cool, a nostalgic sitcom recap. But then the creator pulls a brilliant bait and switch. Suddenly, you realize this sitcom review is actually a deeply researched expose on the psychological dangers of child stardom and the massive failures of TV networks. Defunctland's FastPass video, it starts out about waiting in line at a theme park and pivots into this terrifying look at class warfare and capitalism. It's brilliant. And these digital documentarians have built out a highly specialized ecosystem for themselves. Jenny Nicholson basically owns pop culture and fandoms with her super witty red string corkboard approach. Defunctland is the king of brand failures and theme parks. Frederick Knudsen, he dives into strange internet history. And Wendigoon tackles macabre literature and true crime. Each of these creators completely commands their own specific, meticulously researched domain, acting as our personal guide down these rabbit holes. Section 2, Chronicling the Internet's Oddities. Let's get into the weirder stuff. If we trace the evolution of this genre, it really started with early amateur reviews, stuff like the online gaming show Game Life. Then it evolved into unsolved digital mysteries, where people were exploring bizarre internet anomalies, like the unfavorable semicircle channel. But step 3 is where it gets genuinely profound. Creators like Frederick Knudsen started producing feature-length tragic biographies. His 85-minute video on Temple OS isn't just a tech review. It chronicles the heartbreaking mental decline of its creator, Terry A. Davis, a brilliant programmer who struggled with schizophrenia. It's incredibly moving. Which brings us to Section 3, the outsider narrative. If there's a common thread here, it's the outsider. These are individuals or stories isolated from mainstream society, exploring that really thin boundary between light and dark human experiences. And this concept is so powerful. I mean, it applies to the class-divided greasers in S.E. Hinton's The Outsiders, sure, but it also applies to these independent YouTube creators themselves. They are complete outsiders, entirely bypassing traditional Hollywood gatekeepers to tell their stories directly to us. And this theme completely resonates across both fiction and reality. On the real-world side, these documentarians explore isolated lives like Maury Ornest, whose obsessive art helped him navigate schizoaffective disorder and find some kind of narrative meaning. And on the fictional side, Creators break down works like Stephen King's The Outsider, where a town is ripped apart by Terry Maitland's totally impossible murder alibi. It's a chilling story that perfectly blurs the line between hard evidence and, well, supernatural evil. Section 4. The dark and disturbing. This is where things get really intense. Okay, so this brings us to the ultimate proof of concept for this whole explainer and the absolute peak of the video essay format. YouTuber Wendigoon produced this exhaustive essay on Cormac McCarthy's famously unadaptable novel Blood Meridian. He aptly titled it The Story Too Disturbing to Be a Movie, and it is this unflinching, visceral look at the book's brutally realistic depiction of the Wild West, specifically detailing the historical slaughter of Native Americans and civilians by a ruthless gang. Traditional studios won't touch it, but a video essayist will. Creators like Wendigoon have actually built massive audiences by leaning into this exact kind of darkness. They unpacked dense, genuinely terrifying concepts. We're talking alternate reality games, unadaptable macabre literature, lesser known but horrifying World War II stories, and super complex cult phenomena. They break all of this down for an audience that really wants to engage with dark history in literature without the sanitized, watered-down filter of traditional media. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates exactly why the format works so perfectly for a story like Blood Meridian, where traditional Hollywood completely fails to adapt this brutal, complex literature because, they're sweating over box office returns, MPAA ratings, and a million studio notes. A solitary digital creator just succeeds, and they do it by relying on pure narration, really clear structure, and intense, unfiltered research. They don't need a $100 million budget to adopt the unadaptable. They literally just need a microphone and an honest explanation. Section 5. Why we keep watching. So, with all that said, why do we keep watching? The data here is both hilarious and deeply revealing. Your average Hollywood movie sits at right around 2 hours. Compare that to Jenny Nicholson's Vampire Diaries deep dive at 2.5 hours, or Quentin Review's Victorious video completely dwarfing them both at over 5.5 hours. Viewers are actively, enthusiastically choosing to spend their time with amateur digital documentarians instead of big-budget Hollywood blockbusters. It's wild. I think the secret to this whole shift lies in a really simple truth. It was famously realized by creator James Rallison, who turned his completely mundane stories about working at a sandwich shop into a massive animation empire called The Odd Ones Out. He said, "Your story has value. And sometimes the simplest, most honest way of telling it is exactly what the rest of the world is waiting to see." Audiences just aren't craving corporate polish anymore. They want authentic, human-scale storytelling. Because at the end of the day, these video essays take our mundane, everyday obsessions, whether it's some old tween TV show, a weird piece of internet history, or a profoundly disturbing book like Blood Meridian that we're maybe too intimidated to read ourselves, and they give them profound meaning. They validate our lived experiences. They use humor, vulnerability, and just an obsessive amount of research to forge a deep connection in a media landscape that, let's face it, can often feel incredibly alienating. So I'm going to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative question. Does the democratization of cultural critique mean we're all just waiting for the right person to tell us a story we didn't even know we needed? Because whether it's 5 hours on a sitcom or an unflinching look at Blood Meridian, these creators are proving there's an audience for literally everything. It really makes you wonder, what fascinating, incredibly niche rabbit hole are you going to fall down tonight?